Welcome back to Vegas Aces live stream. My name is Heather Ferris and I will be your host for today. On this live stream, we will be discussing patents and table game inventions with our guest, Brent Weiss with Moneysuit. Brent, would you like to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. First off, thanks for having me on, Heather. It's good to see you again, even though virtually during COVID times. As Heather said, my name is Brent Weiss. I'm the owner and president of Moneysuit Industries, LLC. I'm the creator and developer of games known as Moneysuit 31, 31 Classic, Double Shot 31, Break the House Blackjack, Empty the Rack Blackjack, and Advantage Play 3-Card Fury, which took third place at last year's Cutting Edge Table Games Conference.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thank you very, very much, too, for being on and sharing your experience and everything with Table Game Inventions and also with patents. Now, if you guys, the viewers, if you're watching and you have any questions, you have any suggestions, anything like that, please put it in the chat and I will answer your questions at the end of this video. Now, before we get started, I just want to remind you to hit the notification bell so that way you're always notified of our latest videos and live streams. And if you're new to this channel and this is your first time here, my name is Heather Ferris and I'm the founder of Vegas Aces. I'm also an adjunct professor at UNLV, content creator, consultant, and I've been involved in the casino industry for over 15 years. Vegas Aces helps people learn how to play and deal casino games. And as a way to give back to our community, we offer a free dealing trade school where we help place dealers at no cost. Now, on with the show. Okay, so first thing I want to talk with you about, Brent, is patents. There is so much to patents, and table game inventors, when they are inventing their game, everyone tells them, you got to get a patent, you got to get a patent. And then they try to get a patent and all of a sudden they're being told, no, casino table game inventors can't get patents for their games. They can only get patents for the equipment on the game. And some games actually do get patents, amazingly, and some don't. Beforehand, everyone used to get a patent, and then no one was getting a patent, and now it's like, it's just so confusing right now. So if you can, I would love to hear your experience with this and what you know about patents.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, it's rather confusing and things are kind of fluid. They do keep changing. But the biggest hurdle that had happened on our side of the business at this point, probably about a decade ago, is a case known as Bill Skibert's Capos had come out. And in a nutshell, I'm not going to go too deep into it. What happened was a commodities trader had tried to patent a mathematical equation that they used to hedge risk in an unstable market demand. And what had been determined in that is that mathematics can effectively be patented. It's public domain. And from that started getting applied to numerous industries such as tech and gaming, where they had determined that, like you were saying, such games are really just abstract ideas and it's really just cards moving around a table differently and the math is slightly different, so that all patent applications started getting rejected because of Bilski. And even more so of late, there was a case known as Smith et al., which had actually come out, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was a Baccarat side wager that had been rejected, and they appealed the decision, and then the court had determined that they used these things known as three Alice factors from another case that effectively, like you were saying, meant that you needed effectively a piece of hardware or a piece of equipment that effectively would get you over that hurdle in order to get past and get your game actually patented. Now, to take it a step further, though, like you were saying, is it's very important on our end of the business to protect our products at every end if we can. So, like you were saying, patents are hard pressed to come by these days. However, of late, it seems that things do seem to be changing slightly for the better on our side of things. Over the last several years, we've seen certain games actually get granted the actual patents on the physical aspects of the table games, which a couple years ago really had just started getting issued on the electronic forms. So it is a sign of light for our end of things, but it is a lot of gray area right now where people should definitely pursue patents. You have to understand the costs and timeframes associated, but you just have to go in with the knowledge of knowing that you may or may not actually get it granted. And that doesn't mean that you still don't have a viable product. It just means you don't have as much protection, whereas somebody else might be able to step in, of course, and make a similar game or a knockoff and come forward if you don't have that patent.
Okay. So, how much is it to get a patent? I've heard it's extremely expensive and it takes years before they even decide whether you get your patent or not. So, until then, it's always patent pending.
Correct. Now, it's hard to give you a finite cost associated, and I don't want to step on any attorney's toes, obviously, by misquoting them. But it is a very expensive process. And just talking about cost, what I like to give people that very large range is it can cost you anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 all in. And the process goes where it's when you have your idea, the first thing you're going to do is, of course, talk to a patent attorney, and that patent attorney is going to do a search for you. That's going to run you a couple hundred to a couple $1,000s, depending upon the number of similar inventions out there. And then, depending upon what they find, they'll issue you a opinion letter which says we think this is patentable, or we think that it's not. Unfortunately, there's conflicting patents that already exist. And then from there, the biggest expense really comes from the initial drafting of the actual application. And then, like you said, the time frame effectively runs from anywhere from a year to a year and a half before you're going to get that first response from the actual USPTO, and that's going to be known as an office action. And effectively, what that's going to be is the examiner from the USPTO is going to review your patent application, obviously, cross-reference that with other patents that exist, and then come back with saying, A, claims 1 through 18 are rejected for reasons A, or these claims are going to be accepted with these revisions, and so forth. And every time one of those comes in, your attorney, as long as it's a non-final action, has to then respond to that office action, which again is then going to take about 6 months or so and cost you a pretty penny for the response thereafter as well. And then the one last little thing I want to chime in there is what we were just discussing, what is known as the utility patent. Now that's the 17 or 20-year patent, which is what everybody really knows. On our end of the business, it's actually not a terrible idea as an inventor to pursue what is known as a provisional patent first. Now, what that is effectively is just a placeholder in the USPTO office where it just sits there, it's not reviewed, and effectively you're pending through that time where you can market the game and you do have hypothetically some protection. Whereas if you move forward later on and transfer that over to the utility patent, you get the original filing date from that original provisional application, if that wasn't too much to throw at you in a nutshell.
Well, I just wanted a clarification on one thing real quick. So when you're getting your patent, you said at first what was happening was the math of the game and the actual game itself, they weren't too dissimilar, which is why the patents were being rejected. And you can get patents if it's equipment. You can get patents if it's like a certain idea, or if it's like it's a specialized idea. So my question is what really does get patented on the casino table for the table game invention? What is actually being patented?
Okay, so for example, aside from the exceptions that I said recently, like some physical table games have actually been getting pushed through. So what had been happening after that Bilski case had come out is what a lot of inventors were doing, the patentability versus abstract idea issue is like you were getting to is by incorporating some sort of hardware or some sort of apparatus was getting people over that hump of patentability versus abstract ideas. So for one example is what some people were doing is they were building in random number generators into table game patents, which was a piece of physical hardware that had to be used in conjunction with the game. And by doing so, even though technically speaking, that piece of hardware is what got them over the hump to get the actual claims granted, the other claims do get granted underneath that official independent claim. I know this is, again, stepping out of everybody's wheelhouse that's listening probably, but that's what effectively was getting patented, which then had all the dependent claims come in, which effectively is protecting the games. However, again, that does seem to be changing, where aside from just the hardware aspect, regular physical table games like one of mine, like Advantage Play 3-Card Theory, does seem to be starting to pass muster again and may or may not actually be granted patents for the physical games versus the electronic versions like the ETGs, which are easier to get past because it's a piece of hardware, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So now that it's changing, what is it changing to?
See, what I have been seeing, and my knowledge isn't as vast, obviously, as some patent attorneys that deal with this on a daily basis, but what was happening before, and again, this is my non-patent attorney opinion. I am an attorney, but not a patent attorney. So when we were seeing patents get granted I want to say within the last 5 years, usually you'd see the physical game get rejected, but then the electronic version would be granted. So you have like a computer that's relying on sort of coding to, a screen. I won't get too deep into it, but that was allowing those to get through. Whereas I'll use, let's say, Ultimate Texas Hold'em, just using a game that everyone's familiar with. Whereas, hypothetically speaking, based on what I'm using as an example now, is that the physical game hypothetically wasn't protected, but the electronic versions in like ETG form or Stadium format technically were. So that's what people were effectively getting pushed through on patents. And then from there, you don't want to see somebody else, while even though the electronic form is protected and the physical isn't, you're not going to see as many people stepping in and ripping off the physical form because, again, that patent exists and the market already exists for the games that are protected under that IP.
Okay, cool. So before we stop talking about patents, is there anything else that you want to tell our viewers that you think that they may need to know if they want to be table game inventors?
Just what we've already crossed off the list. Just expect, knowing going in, that it's very unlikely that you're going to get that patent pushed through, whether it's a Bilski issue or it just had existed in the past. But don't get discouraged by these things. I mean, people like myself are still out there as an independent trying to make this stuff happen. So, you could use me as some inspiration, I guess. Don't follow me completely. That wouldn't be good. But just go in there knowing what your hurdles are that are in front of you with an open mind, and just kind of keep pressing forward. Don't give up on a dream just because you think you're going to have some IP hurdles. Doesn't mean you can't get a product out there.
Great advice. Thank you. So before we go on to our next section, our next part of questions, I just want to say to our viewers out there, if you guys like this video and you want to help support Vegas Aces, please remember to tip your dealer, and now you can with Super Chat. Super Chat is a way YouTube allows you to show your appreciation by tipping me any amount you want. Go ahead, give it a try, or show your support by becoming a member of our Patreon page. We have several different levels and rewards for you to choose from. Any membership level counts, even $1, so please go join today. Also, remember, if you guys have any questions at all for Brent or myself, please put it in the chat and we will answer your questions at the end of this video. Okay, so back to the content. Table game inventions. It's pretty hard to invent a table game, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately it is.
How many games do you have right now under your belt?
Right now, I think I have 7 that are effectively commercialized. I'm going to have by the end of this year 4 out in live play at some point along the way, but I have about 7 or 8 fully completed that I'm hoping to get back out on the market.
So from the experience of you inventing 7 games, what did you find to be the hardest thing about it? And what advice do you have to give to our viewers that would maybe make that a little bit easier for them?
Unfortunately, like everybody knows, the hardest aspect of this whole process is not the development, it's the sales. Obviously, when you're trying to get something new as an independent like us, to get a facility to take something off of their floor to put this in, that's the biggest hurdle. And it took me about 6 years to develop my initial network to try to start doing, getting the context to speak to the people that are the decision makers. That's the biggest issue. And the best thing I could say to people is the new world, even pre-COVID, but now everything is digital. What has really helped me on the sales front a lot is actually certain social media outlets like LinkedIn, because it's easy for me to not target in a bad way, but figure out who it is that I do need to speak to. Whereas when I first started, what I was doing to try to figure out who the director of table games or the VP of casino operations were, I was calling operators at casino facilities, trying to gather information, like, straight cold calling facilities. But the biggest hurdle is definitely sales. And the best piece of advice I can give to aspiring developers with no network out there is try to become active on things like LinkedIn, try to contact people like, of course, yourself, who has an existing network and does things for developers like me, like, develop, whether it be documentation, do the videos like we've all seen you do, and it will just help getting games in front of people. Because when you're going in cold and you have nobody, it's just like trying to walk up on the street and sell somebody a DVD. You're just a random person trying to sell them something they may or may not want or need.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with you 100%. And that's one of the things we tell our clients is when you're doing this, you have to remember it's like you're putting a product on the shelf of a grocery store. You need marketing, you need packaging, you need, advertising. You need to tell people about your product. Otherwise, they're not going to go play. And it's the same thing with table game inventions.
Exactly. And one more little aspect to that also is it's not even just selling it to the consumer. On our end, we need to sell it to staff. We need to sell it to everybody on the floor, because if you don't train, and you know this better than most because you train dealers yourself, but if I'm coming into a facility and you have your floor staff that knows all of their games right now, I'm like, okay, I have this great product, and believe me, none of them are going to have that mindset at first. You're going to think your baby is great, but it's something new to them and they have no idea what it is. That you need to really be on the same level as everybody, be personable, and just be ready to hear negative feedback and to hear just pushback for people that just don't want to learn something new. So you have to be thick-skinned in the sense of being able to take the constructive criticism and at the same time listening and actually applying that to your products moving forward, because there's a lot of things you don't want to hear that will actually really benefit you in tailoring your product for the marketplace moving forward. And at first I didn't want to hear it, but over time I needed to listen, and it actually helped me grow over time in this business.
Yeah. And there are several things too that it will kill your game right away. I mean, your game could be the best game in the entire world. It could be fun, simple, great. I mean, just the most coolest game ever. And there are certain things that will just utterly destroy it. And like you said, like what you were talking about, if the dealers don't know how to deal your game and they're dealing it improperly and they're not dealing your game how it should be dealt, that will destroy it.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is for so many different reasons, whether it just be mispays, which will get them in trouble with their staff and supervisors, they're going to hate the game. If a player is seeing the game and they're seeing a dealer having trouble with payouts, they know they might get slighted somewhere along the way and get mad at a dealer and walk away. I've seen this millions of times, so have you. And it's just a matter of, yeah, every little thing can go wrong in this, and everybody has their own perspective and everybody has their own opinions coming from one specific side of the table on this, which is, I guess, kind of funny to say it that way, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, and if they don't know what they're doing when they're dealing this game, they could be explaining to the players, you know, how to play incorrectly, and that could give the player a bad view of your game. Whereas if they played it correctly, they might have fun, they might enjoy it, they might have like a new favorite game, but because this dealer explained it the way that he did, they don't have fun, they don't enjoy it, they don't get it, it's confusing, you know. And that's one of the things about Table Game Inventions is when you invent a table game, you want it to be simple, but you don't want it to be boring, you know. Exactly. Like, yeah. So would you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And one little add-on to what you were saying is, even if it's just something as simple as a dealer explaining optimal strategy or even basic strategy improperly, that one wrong decision every few hands could jack up the house edge on a game for that player significantly, which means they're going to get cleaned down. They're never coming back to the table. But like you had said, it's not only just keeping games simple, because games like UTH, with Ultimate Texas Hold'em, for those that don't know the abbreviation, which is the most popular game out there right now, is not that simple. A lot of dealers do not like it because there's all these different steps, there's all these different betting options for players, and there's all these different wagers. But when it comes to developing a game, I know you're friendly with Mike Shackelford, obviously, which many of your viewers, I'm sure, are very familiar as well. So his big thing is, it's got to be, keep it simple, stupid, right? You got to keep it incredibly simple, not only for players, but for dealers as well. So you have to keep the strategy simple. You have to keep the gameplay simple so you can explain a game within like 15 to 30 seconds to a new player. Now, it doesn't have to be everything, but you have to give the general concept to somebody quick so they could say, yeah, you know, that sounds okay, I'll give it a shot, versus I don't know what you're talking about, pal, so I'm just going to carry on and go over to blackjack. So like you said, it's got to be simple. And then when it also comes into development, the math has to be tailored perfectly. The best example to use for this is, I believe, 3-card poker when it first came out way back when, from Derek Webb. Obviously, we know 3-card is the biggest game effectively ever. But when it first started, I think it failed 3 times at first. And I think on the third one, the determination, I could be somewhat off on this, but I think it was determined that, I think it was the flush or the straight on the pair plus was paying too much return was built into it or something. So the game effectively was dumping money. And I think that's what effectively made it not succeed at first. Now, obviously, 3-card poker is 3-card poker, so we know they fixed something, obviously, somewhere along the way. But something so simple like that could ruin a 3-card poker from making it the next 3-card poker, as funny as it sounds to me saying that. So,
and you bring up an excellent point too. You have a hit like 3-card poker, and that game sat in a corner of some, you know, random casino for what was it, a year or two? Like, it was a while. Wow. Yeah, before it finally became big. So just because it's not succeeding right away doesn't mean you don't have a hit.
Exactly, and that comes down to not even just floor placement, but placement around the country also, as you know, and you've seen, as jurisdictional markets are so different, where if you go to a place like Washington State now, one of their most popular games on the floor is still Spanish 21. And some people, I'm sure a lot of your viewers know what Spanish 21 is, but Spanish 21 has been out for a long, long time. I think it's mass publishing, and it's been on the market for a very long time and was super successful. And then over time, it started coming out of a lot of markets. And you'll see it virtually nowhere in the Northeast or on the East Coast. Then you go back to the West and then the Northwest, it's everywhere. You never know what's going to work in some places. And some of my games like 31 Classic and Moneysuit 31 is I grew up playing game 31 in the Northeast, and I know it's very big in places like Louisiana and Mississippi where a game might work, and then you take it to like Minnesota or Michigan, and people might absolutely hate it there for whatever reason. So you never know what's going to work where. And to go back to what to tell developers, like you said, if you fail one time, make changes and then try to find that right jurisdiction to launch a game. If it keeps failing, the product's got some issues, but you never know what will work somewhere. And then it might work at one facility that's next door to another one. You just never really know what someone's going to take to a game. And sometimes it's just gambling on both sides. If people are getting beaten up, they're going to hate it. If people win a ton of money, they're going to love the game, even if it's the worst game on the planet. So it's kind of funny, the psychological aspect of everything on our end.
Yeah. And it's also weird too that speaking of the psychological aspect of it, if you put your game into a casino in Las Vegas, you're more likely to put that game in another casino somewhere in another state in America. Like it's easier, because it's that gold standard.
And some people don't agree. I mean, I'm full-fledged on that train. I think that Nevada is a great starting point. Not everybody agrees. Some of my associates and acquaintances do not agree with that at all. Where one, I'm not going to name him obviously, but him. And he's out on the West Coast, and he's like, I'm absolutely never presenting anything to a Vegas facility until I have 3 or 4 working installs in all these different states. And I'm with you. I think that if you get it in Nevada and it's working at, let's say, a Mirage or an MGM Grand, and players come in and see it and they love it, they'll be like, I'm taking this back to my state with me. Going to my tribal facility saying, I saw this great game, 3-Card Fury, you need to bring it in here. Or I saw this game, Empty the Rack Blackjack, you need to bring it in. Versus you have a hit in Washington State, then they come to Vegas and ask people if they've seen it. They're not going to know what that person from Washington is talking about. So I agree with you 100% on that, but not everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. And just playing devil's advocate real quick. So since we both agree, why not, right? Mm-hmm. What would the reasonings be behind it for not going to Las Vegas? What would some reasonings be that your friend would say?
And I guess I'm going to kind of split this answer up, but in his perspective is who's going to know about it in Las Vegas, right? You're putting a new game on the floor. You want people to somewhat know about it beforehand, so you're not just recreating a new market. That's his opinion, where he wants to put it into, let's say, 5 Southern California locations, and then it's working. Everyone in SoCal loves it, so when they go to Vegas next weekend for this party, they're going to not see it on the floor and they're going to ask somebody. Or then he has, the data to show this facility what it's holding or what it's dropping versus 3-card poker. So that's his perspective. He wants to have a functioning mathematical product, but as we both know, again, variance changes things drastically from one place to another. So I could have a game in Southern California holding 10%, which is going to be an absolute failure everywhere for a carnival game, and then it could be in the northern part of the state and be holding 29% perfectly. So that's why it's really it's subjective. So everyone's going to have their opinions. We all know if you disagree with that opinion, you're going to be yelled at. So it is what it is. But that's one of the reasons why. And now just to take it a step further is when you have Vegas, when we think Vegas, we think the Strip, but you obviously being from Vegas know there's much more to Nevada than the Strip. So stations facilities or board gaming facilities that are more local markets might be, I'll call it acceptable for my friend from California, because it's not like the tourist market on the Strip where he's, would use those arguments against where I'm saying I wouldn't want to bring it there first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Definitely. So before we move on, is there anything else about actually inventing the table game that you want to tell our viewers? I know when I get emails from people, a lot of times they're asking me about the process. So I tell them, I give them the steps. For example, when you start off, you have to get a big sheet of paper and actually draw the table out and play it and, write down the rules. And people are surprised that they have to do this, So is there anything else that you would want to add to that?
There's actually one little thing. It's funny. It goes right in line with what you were saying. And this is beyond, I guess, but when it comes to, like you were saying, drawing out a layout, what's very important, which people always forget, is making sure procedures function. And it's not a hassle for a dealer. For instance, my game 3-Card Fury, there's about 4 betting circles, right? And if those betting circles, and I realized this early on, we're in the wrong place, a dealer's not going to be able to pay out on the ante without reaching over wagers, which we all know can come into bet capping issues. If you have, we're not going to go that into a far wormhole of cheating on this, but you understand the issues with that. And if it's just a pain for a dealer to deal, they're never going to want to deal the game. If they're leaning over the table just to pay off on a play wager, and their back is killing them, they're going to pretty much not convince anybody to sit down because they're not going to want to be dealing in that game. So just simply something like the mechanics of actually dealing games, something that simple is really important when you're trying to put something on paper and making the procedures dealer friendly. Something as simple as reach can destroy a game. So little things like that are also very important.
Yeah. And as a marketing company, reach, it's weird. You don't think about this stuff when you're doing it, but reach is pretty important. Like we actually have to sit there and measure the dealer's reach to make sure that they can reach it. And when we're printing our table layouts, we have to make sure we don't go over a certain amount. So that way all dealers can reach it. I mean, it's like you don't think that you would have to think about these kind of things, right?
Yeah, every little nuance has to be thought through, and you won't know that right up front. But over time, unfortunately, I got yelled at and had to learn that over experience.
Yeah, it's always one way to learn, right?
Trial and error is the best, right?
Right. So, is there anything else you would like to tell the audience before we move on to the next section?
No, not really. Just the biggest thing is when it comes to the math for a game, just try to find an independent first. Don't go to a GLI or BMM right off the bat because you're going to have to play with pay tables and so forth. So it would be a good idea to find an independent first. And that's the last little bit that I think I'll throw in there.
Okay, cool. So moving on to the next section. A lot of times when table games are talking to me, they think that they're going to invent a table game and then just sell it to, Galaxy Gaming or something, and everything will be fine and happy, and the game will go in and everyone will be, be paid and played and all this stuff. Like everything that they think just does not happen. Like this is just not how it works, and I'm sure you can talk a lot about this, but from what I hear from people is they spend a lot of time, a lot of years, a lot of money. Like when you're inventing a game, you're going to spend $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, depending on how many variations of the game you have, or how many games you have. And one of the things is after they spend all that time and money on it, they finally do get to sell it to, say, Galaxy Gaming or whoever it is, because we have so many different ones. And they buy the game for $10,000 and then put it on the shelf and it never goes anywhere. And the inventor is just like distraught,
Mm-hmm.
So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about just that weird aspect of, what people think is going to happen versus reality.
Yeah, and that has changed over time also. And again, this is kind of a subjective opinion aspect of things. And just before I jump headfirst into that, just to take a step back to kind of go back to the additional things I should tell people is, and this factors into the cost perspective, is everybody needs to understand, and on the table games perspective, is that each jurisdiction is very different when it comes to approval and licensing. So on our aspect, and to put it in a nutshell, is that if you're going to launch a game, you want to find jurisdictions that aren't going to cost you $75,000 for approval and licensing, and some of them will. So you really need to find out if you're going to require a service supplier license, a distributor license, or a manufacturer license, or none, and that will pretty much dictate where you're going to try to launch a game at first as an independent. Certain jurisdictions like Pennsylvania and some of the other really expensive ones just aren't going to be feasible, especially if you're going to have to be a manufacturer. You're just going to keep losing money every year until you go out of business. Okay, so to touch base upon how things are going to work is, like you were saying, especially these days, like about 5-10 years ago, things were a little bit different, where if you did come up with a game and it was great, you approached somebody like Roger Snow from Side Games and they liked it, they might make you an offer right off the bat without having any proof of concept. Now, obviously, things have changed a little bit since then. So realistically, the way things work now is that you're not just going to come up with a game and sell it to somebody. Unfortunately, you're going to have to go out and hopefully pick up your first trial yourself, maybe 2, maybe 3, and hopefully they all work. So these days, the reason why you're going to want to do that is just showing proof of concept. So like you said, you're not just going to approach somebody. You just spend $35,000 patenting a game, and then you sell it to somebody, company X, for 10 grand. And like you said, I'm going to use X not to upset anybody. They take it on the shelf and it just sits there and they never sell the game. And because they're out of business, I can kind of openly talk about this. I had formerly been under license with TEQ, and I came to them because I wanted to launch in Canada, and the facility wanted a progressive system. And back to the licensing aspect, I can't do that myself for a number of different reasons. I can't produce the hardware and then go through all of the costs associated. So I came to them with the trial. They were going to move forward. We signed our contracts. They launched some of my games at G2E the next year, but never moved forward with the trial in Canada. And one of the important things I did, and this is taking the step beyond what I thought I'd be discussing here, but for your own people that are listening, one of the important things I do if you do get to the point and you do license it to one of the big boys is you want to have minimum table requirements per year. So that in the event somebody does take the game and put it on a shelf, like they did with mine, you have an exit strategy or an exit later on if they do in fact act in a bad way, that's what I'll say, so that you can take it back and move forward. So what I had done is I canceled the contract, was able to get side games, or at the time it was still Shuffle Master, to produce my progressive review myself. So that's one of the aspects of it.
That's great advice.
Yeah, and now just to take one step further is if you get games out yourself, and say you get like 10 placements, and that, hey, fantastic, you're probably not going to sell, and they're all working, and you're taking in, like a couple tens of thousands of dollars in monthly, leasing revenue, and then you approach one of the bigger boys, they're not going to give you 10 grand for the pen. They're going to, want the active installs. They're going to assume those contracts. You could get some significant upfront money, which would prevent those companies from effectively shelving the game because they're not going to make an investment, shelve it, and then just lose that money so that they can sell their own products. If they're going to make that sort of investment, then they're going to, move forward with the product and try to earn some more money. Now, one little final thing, not to keep rambling, but some things are slowly changing, unfortunately, on our side of the business, where there's a lot of site licenses that are really getting executed between facilities and the bigger suppliers now, where instead of paying like for a monthly per table lease and they're all different prices, they've just been bulking everything together to effectively give it to them cheaper. So it's a little bit harder for us to break into the big boys and enter their portfolio because it's just going to get lost in the mix of all those games. So that might change things on our side of the business a little bit, where independents might want to move forward themselves for a little while before they look to sell it to one of the bigger distributors and so on.
Okay, cool. And one last question, and then I think we'll end it for today. After your experience, what would you recommend? Would you recommend the inventor going out and doing this by himself, like what you were talking about, or would you recommend them creating the game and then selling it? Like, what do you think is better for the inventor?
These days, I would say it's best to try to at least get your foot out somewhere. I would say try to get your first install yourself. If it's just not going to happen, some people just don't have the wherewithal to be, I'll say, salesmen, and some people know they really can't do it. They just don't want to be face-to-face with people, and they don't want to handle the rejection. Then instead of maybe looking for one of like the big guys, like whether it be Cygames, Galaxy, or so forth, maybe approaching one of the smaller distributors that, doesn't have a gigantic portfolio of products where this doesn't get lost, that is licensed in a few jurisdictions. I don't want to specifically name any people, but let's say I'll just use Aces Up Gaming. I'll throw out there because I know Todd, where they're a smaller company. They focus on some other jurisdictions, not everywhere, and they might be more hard-pressed to get your game out there versus someone being scared of a shelving situation and so forth, if that answers that question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
No problem.
And for people who are watching too, if you are inventing a table game and you don't want to do the face-to-face, the selling or the marketing part of it, Vegas Aces is here to help. So we do provide all of the marketing for you. We create the table layouts, the rack cards, custom equipment, anything you need. And then we will use our contacts and we will help get your game into the casino for a field trial. So.
And one of the biggest things that I like that you do for people, which I do also, is the biggest thing now because of COVID, we're not having in-person meetings so quickly. Obviously, the demo videos that you supply and you produce do wonders for people like me at this point. Whereas granted, I do my own, but they're the same, where when you could do a demonstration video, it's the same as if you're in person in front of those people at the facility. And if you could pair that video, and then if you could afford maybe a game demo online like I have on my website, moneysuit31.com, it's the sales pitches right there for you. You never have to speak a word. All you need is good literature, a demo, a video, and it does the selling for you as long as you have a viable product that's worthwhile for the facility.
Cool. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for telling us your experiences and giving us your wisdom and everything. And we really, really hope we could have you back one day.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm happy to answer any questions and come back whenever you want to have me on.
And do you want to let people know how they could find you or one of your games? Do you have a website, social media, email, anything you want to throw out there?
Sure. You could reach my website is moneysuit31.com. And if you want to email me, if you have any questions about anything we discussed, if you want to go through Vegas Aces, of course, by all means, you can email me through the website. There's a contact us tab that just gives you a Gmail address. And then I'm very big on things like LinkedIn. You just search my name, Brent Weiss. I am on Facebook. I'm not a very big presence there as far as with the company. So I would say LinkedIn or email me through the website. And all my game demos are on that website, moneysuit31.com.
Okay, cool. And back to our viewers real quick. If you guys like this video and you want to help support Vegas Aces, then one of the ways you could do it is by going to vegas-aces.com and clicking on one of our affiliate banners. When you sign up for an account through an affiliate link from this site, we get a small commission. It really helps, especially right now. If you ever have any problems, we will be there for you. We will help you through any dispute that you have. And also, too, if you guys have any more questions or comments, put them in now because we're going to answer them here in just 1 second. But just a quick reminder, Vegas Aces is supported by viewers like you. Donations make it possible for us to bring you all of these videos for free. If you think this video was worth more than $0, please contribute the amount you feel it's worth by clicking the link in the description below. Okay, now let's go answer your questions. Everything, we've been waiting for this, so let's do this. Okay, so our first question comes from Dane. And he says, I apologize if this has already been answered, but if someone wants to get a patent for a new table game, what are the procedures to get the said patent?
Okay, so to try to put it in a nutshell is, like we said, you're going to want to, when you have the idea ironed out in your head, effectively you want to put it down on paper so you at least have the idea. You'll then reach out to a patent attorney, whether you just do research on Avo or get referred to somebody. And if you need table games patent attorneys, by all means, reach out to me and I can put you in touch with some specific people that do work in this industry. And then that patent attorney is going to first do a search for you to make sure that there's no conflicting marks. Once they do that search, they're going to issue to you what's known as an opinion letter, which says they believe that you have no conflicts out there and you can move forward, or they'll tell you, unfortunately, you have an issue. And then effectively that attorney, once you retain him, is going to then draft the patent for you. And once it's drafted, you'll then, of course, they'll submit it on your behalf. And effectively nothing is going to happen for about a year to a year and a half. In that interim, what's happening is it's getting assigned an examiner at the USPTO, which is the Patent and Trademark Office. At some point within that year to year and a half process, they're going to review it and then issue what's known as an office action, which is going to either grant certain claims or reject them, whether it's a final rejection or just a non-final rejection. Once that comes in, your patent attorney, if he believes you have an argument against, will then draft his office action response, which is usually 3 to 6 month window, which is dictated in the actual office action from the USPTO. Once that then goes in, when it's submitted by your attorney, it then just sits again for another 3 to 6 months. Then you're either going to get another office action, a grant letter, or it's going to be fully rejected, unfortunately. And then at that point, if your patent is going to be issued, they'll issue an issuance letter. And then from there, effectively, you pay the issuance fees and then it gets issued. Right before the patent is issued, you can actually file what's known as a continuation. Whereas once you know patent A is going to get granted, if you want to broaden the claims slightly and alter them a little bit, you can file continuation, which is effectively like a new patent application for a second patent. And once the first one is granted, if that continuation is filed, you'll go through the same process with that. But otherwise, if that first patent is granted, it's granted, you're now patented, and then you'll pay maintenance fees over the next effectively 17 years, every 3.5 years or so.
Cool. Thank you. That's a pretty big nutshell. It's a lot to it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for being on. And thank you everyone for watching. Really do appreciate it. Before we go, one last one. Domestic, thank you very much for the super chat. I promise I will give Pip those treats. We have super chat perks where one of them, Pip gets a treat, my little dog. She loves it when I do live streams. Anyway, thank you again. And we live stream every Monday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So we hope to see you at the next one. And until then, this is Heather Ferris and Brent Weiss reminding you that education can change the world. See you guys.
Take care.
Bye.